Dragons are some of the most fearsome creatures in all of media, and with Pokemon, it's no different. But dragon types come with some glaring drawbacks, like having weak first stages that take forever to evolve. So could dragons beat a Hardcore Nuzlocke in one of the most difficult mainline games on Challenge Mode? When any Pokemon that faints is boxed forever, no items from the bag are allowed in battle, set mode is mandatory, and I'm not allowed to overlevel the next gym. Well, to start off, there's the issue of even acquiring a dragon type in the first place. Most dragon types in Pokemon are in the late game, and to even be able to get one, we're gonna have to get creative and use Pokemon Dream Radar. Pokemon Dream Radar is a software complementary to Pokemon Black and White 2, and in this software, there are a few later game Pokemon that we can get right from the start, among them the adorable Swablu. And while Diantha here is not quite a dragon, she does evolve into one, so for now, she's gonna have to do. Coming through Dream Radar, however, she does have her hidden ability Cloud9, which unfortunately I don't foresee being particularly useful this run. That being said, Diantha is the only Pokemon we can get for a decent while, meaning she's gonna have to take on Charon's team of 3 all by her lonesome. For this reason, I made sure to get her as close to level 15 as possible, since we only have to hit the level cap by the start of the fight. I also made sure to teach her the Frustration TM, which we can pick up at Flotchessy Ranch. And making sure my Swablu's as disaffected with me as possible, it's actually doing pretty decent damage, allowing us to take out his Patrat in 2 hits without taking any damage. Second out is his Lillipup, and Frustration is actually doing an enormous amount of damage, so that even after an Oranberry recovery, it's enough to just take it out with a second Frustration. Amazingly, Charon only has one of his Pokemon left as we're at full health, and a single critical hit Frustration is actually enough to just take out the Pidove, meaning that sometimes hate truly is the answer. But since it's actually kind of difficult to keep the friendship stat low in any Pokemon game, and the fact that we get the return TM right after the gym, I decided to run around a lot and max out Swablu's friendship instead to get the maximum power. I also make sure to pick up the Silk Scarf to power up our normal moves even further. And this is going to make my strategy for Roxy that much more powerful, considering my main attacking moves are Return and Round. Considering we're so early in the game and a reset wouldn't be too detrimental, I decided to try for a Sing, and I end up actually hitting the 55% accuracy. I then decide to go for the Special Round here instead of the physical Return, but I'm not exactly sure if it's better since Return is twice as powerful. Koffing's defense is a lot higher than its special defense, so hitting it on the special side is probably the correct move here, and I even managed to get Roxy to waste her Super Potion on the sleeping Koffing, allowing me to take it out in a couple of rounds after that. Not only does this edge me over to level 20, giving me that extra stat boost, it also means she's not going to be using a Super Potion against any of her other Pokemon. Her second Pokemon, Grimer, loves to go for Disable, so I decided to chance Sing again, and I actually end up getting the sleep. Grimer having much weaker defense than Koffing, it's an easy 2-hit KO with Return. This means Roxy's only left with her final Pokemon, Whirlipede. And since I'm at full health here, I decided to just risk it, and I end up connecting with a third Sing, putting the Whirlipede to sleep. Full power Return is doing a lot of damage here as well, but after a Citrus Berry, it's not quite enough for the Return to be a 2-hit KO, but the Whirlipede just stays asleep, allowing me to take it out with a third Return and thus claiming the second gym badge. Moving along to Castelia City, we have a very important stop at Fennel's lab where we can now get access to Game Sync and thus the Dream World, allowing us to continue our Dragon Quest. Now, the Dream World was discontinued by Nintendo years ago, and despite me remembering it fondly from my youth, at this point, we've got to rely on the existing fan servers. In the Dream World, there are multiple areas, 3 of which are available right away and giving us access to a new dragon. So I decide on the rugged path to pick up a Bagon. Not only does the Dream World Bagon come with its hidden ability Sheer Force, it also gets its egg moves Outrage and Dragon Dance. So Steven here's a pretty strong looking girl. The problem with adding this Bagon to the team is that we now have an actual dragon type, meaning that we can't use Swablu until it actually evolves into one. And so even though we picked up another team member, we still just have 1 usable Pokemon. And considering that Berg has a total of 4 compared to our 1, it isn't exactly going to be a fair fight. Starting out with his Dwebble, I immediately go for a Dragon Dance to try and set up as much as possible as fast as I can, as he goes for a Feint Attack instead of Rock Blast, which doesn't do too much damage. I also equipped Steven with the leftovers from the sewers to stay as healthy as possible as we're Dragon Dancing up. Once I've gone for my second Dragon Dance, the Dwebble boosts its own speed by 2 stages with a Rock Polish, but since I have +2 as well, I can go for a Bite, outspeeding the next turn, activating its Citrus Berry as it gets more speed with Rock Polish. At +4, it definitely has enough to outspeed, but once again just going for Feint Attack, meaning I can take it out with another Bite. Air Blast, being the weakest link on Berg's team, gives me the perfect opportunity to set up a few more Dragon Dances, and after it hits me with a Headbutt, I take it out with a Headbutt of my own. This means we now have to face face Berg's ace Pokemon Leavanny, but we've prepared for it with all those Dragon Dances, managing to outspeed, taking it out with the 120 base power Stab Outrage, and the same goes for the Shelmet, claiming our 3rd gym badge. This allows us to head over to the Desert Resort, where we can go and look for our next encounter. Unfortunately for us, however, much like Swablu, Trapinch is not a dragon yet. So despite the fact that Cynthia here is the perfect counter for the next gym leader's team, I'm not going to be allowed to use it since it doesn't evolve before the level cap, meaning that I'm once again stuck with only Bagon for the next gym battle.
Bagon sucks.
Excuse me, well, okay, he's pretty weak. But luckily for us, Bagon, unlike Trapinch, does evolve before level 32, turning into Shelgon. And with my one bulky boy, it's now time to take on my arch nemesis, Elisa. The fact that dragons resist electric types is certainly in our favor, but the prevalence of static on our team could definitely cause some problems. The first turn she goes for Pursuit, which is a strange choice since I only have one Pokemon on my team, but at least it gets me a free Dragon Dance. I then go for Protect, which I mostly do every other turn to maximize Leftovers recovery. Because of the speed boost from the first Dragon Dance, I now outspeed with the second as I get hit by an Aerial Ace. And since Emolga insists on hitting me with Aerial Aces, I can just get another couple free Dragon Dances, getting me up to +4 attack and +4 speed. Now looking back at this, I should have taught Steven Rock Tomb instead of Headbutt to have a non-contact move to not risk getting staticked at all. However, since I did end up using Headbutt and not getting paralyzed by either Emolga or Flaffy, I guess I got away with this one. And beating Elisa this smoothly felt very good, since this game's about to get me in a lot of trouble.
That's right, boys. That's Univa's top model right there. Oh, so you're interested in Team Plasma, are ya?
No, miss me with your crazy medieval cosplay cult. You know what I don't want to miss, though? The fact that our 2 boxed Pokemon can finally evolve under the level cap, evolving Diantha into Altaria and Cynthia into Vibrava. And with that, it's time to take on the 5th gym leader, Clay, and his ground types. Clay is a very difficult gym leader in general, especially on challenge mode, and even though we have 2 new members on the team to fight, it's not going to be easy. Immediately, Diantha gets her attack lowered by Intimidate, so I opt to go for Dragon Breath right away, which does a little bit over half, activating Krokorok's Citrus Berry. It then hits me with a Torment, meaning I can't use the same move the next turn, so I go for a Round instead, which sets me up great after it goes for a Sandstorm, meaning I can take it out with another Dragon Breath. Second out is Clay's Onix, and this thing loves to go boom. Knowing this, I immediately swap out into Steven as the Onix goes for a Rock Polish to boost its speed. I should have probably gone for Protect expecting the boom, but it just Rock Slides, which does get the flinch, and it subsequently goes for the Explosion, but since I'm almost at full health, it doesn't actually do too much to Steven, allowing me to set up a Dragon Dance. Having the Onix take itself out as I get to boost my stats is a pretty good deal in my book. I immediately go for a Headbutt against a Sand Slash, and I manage to get a flinch, but my second one is not quite as lucky as it hits me with a Bulldoze. However, because of my Dragon Dances, I still outspeed and take it out with another Headbutt. Finally, we have to deal with his ace Excadrill, which outspeeds despite my boosts, hitting me with a Rock Slide, but I don't flinch, managing to hit it with a Rock Tomb, lowering Excadrill's speed. I then manage to misclick, going for Rock Tomb again instead of Protect, meaning that the Excadrill gets to hit me with a Bulldoze, but I survive on 11 HP. I obviously need to swap out here, going into Cynthia as the Excadrill actually misses a Metal Claw. I outspeed because of the Rock Tombs, and a Bulldoze is not quite enough to take out the Excadrill, activating its Citrus Berry as it hits me hard with a Metal Claw, but at this point, I'm free to outspeed the next turn, taking out the Excadrill, claiming our 5th gym badge. A little too close to comfort when it came to Shelgon right there, because losing that thing would have been extremely detrimental to the rest of the run. Defeating the Driftveil Gym, however, does get us access to the HM Surf, which means we can now get to Miss Strolton Cave and find our next encounter, Axew. Axew is an awesome dragon type that almost shares my real name, but I end up naming her Iris. With an acceptable, neutral, bashful nature, we can even evolve her right away into a Fracture. And with that, we have to face the 6th gym leader, Skyla, and her flying types, and this girl is normally such a pushover that I decided to just go in at level 40 instead of at the cap. And I'll be the one to say it, this was a huge mistake. Immediately, Vibrava takes a ton of damage from Psychic, but I didn't expect Swoobat to outspeed, and a Crunch doesn't do enough to take it out, but at least I get the defense drop. This means that Skyla's most likely going to waste her turn going for a Hyper Potion, which gives us a free chance to go for another Crunch, and because of the defense drop, it's enough to just take out the Swoobat. She then sends in her ace Pokemon Swanna, and not wanting to be outsped and taken out by a Surf, I go ahead and swap out into Iris, but Surf actually does a lot of damage. I then get immediately taken down into the red by an Air Slash and flinched on top of that. Things are looking pretty bad here, so I decide to swap out into Steven, who I expect to have more defense, but an Air Slash actually does a huge amount of damage. Not wanting to risk wasting a turn by getting flinched by Air Slash, I decide to immediately swap out into Diantha, who only takes about a quarter from the Air Slash. However, unfortunately, this Swanna has Feather Dance, reducing my attack by 2 stages, so while I go for Dragon Dance, it only gets me back up to -1. The speed boost at least lets me outspeed the next turn, getting back to neutral attack as she misses an Air Slash. A neutral return takes her just below half, activating her Citrus Berry, as I then get hit by another Feather Dance, getting me back to -2 again. Since I can't really switch here, I'm kind of forced to go for a Dragon Dance, getting me back up to -1 attack again as I get hit by another Air Slash. Yet another Dragon Dance gets me back to my regular attack stat as another Air Slash gets a critical hit, leaving me at 3 HP. Things are looking incredibly grim at this point, and I'm not even sure if a Fly can take this thing out. However, I do manage to pull off a critical hit on my own, at least taking out the Swanna. Since I'm once again in no real position to switch here, I decide to just go for a Fly against this Sigilyph at neutral attack, and it doesn't even do over half, as it then just takes out Diantha with a Psychic. Alright, I guess things are getting serious now. I immediately go for Protect with Steven to get as much leftovers recovery as possible. Then, fortunately, the next turn, the Sigilyph doesn't connect with its Hypnosis, allowing me to take it out with a crit Outrage. This does, however, mean that we're locked into Outrage as she sends in her Skarmory, which does about 25% as she sets up her speed with Agility. Also, since I didn't get confused after the second turn of Outrage, I have to stay in and tank this Steel Wing from the Skarmory as I go for an Outrage, taking it down just below half, activating its Citrus Berry. After the third Outrage, I am of course going to get confused, meaning I have to swap out, which unfortunately means that Iris is gonna have to take one for the team. At least she got a little bit of Rocky Helmet damage on this thing, but I once again send in Steven. I immediately go for Protect just to get that 1/16th back from leftovers. The Skarmory then hits me for some chip damage with a Steel Wing as I decide to set up with a Dragon Dance. I then use Protect once again to recover with my leftovers as the Skarmory hits me with a Steel Wing and I set up with yet another Dragon Dance. Unfortunately, it seems that Skyla's onto me because the next turn I use Protect, the Skarmory goes for Agility, which means it's going to outspeed the next turn, hitting me with yet another Steel Wing, taking me down to just 32 HP as Brick Break gets it down into the red. I go for yet another Protect just in case I need it to survive the next Steel Wing. However, it looks like I would have survived a non-crit anyway, and a Brick Break is enough to seal the deal, claiming us the 6th gym badge. But we lost half of the team in the process. However, we must press on, and since the team is looking kinda grim at the moment, I decide to check the Icy Cave area in the Dream World where we can get a Druddigon. I end up getting a halfway decent Impish Nature boosting my defense, and unfortunately Moldbreaker's Druddigon's hidden ability is definitely its least useful one. Then, while making my way through Twist Mountain, Cynthia gets to level 45, meaning we finally have ourselves a Flygon. But Flygon is not going to be very useful versus our next opponent, who could be a huge potential destructive force against the team, Zinzolin. In this first battle, he only has Cryogonal and Sneasel, so I make sure to give Eviolite to Steven as he then shatters the Cryogonal's light screen and takes care of it with a Brick Break. Knowing that the Samurott is likely going to go for the quad effect of Revenge versus the incoming Sneasel, I make sure to go for Protect to dodge any incoming ice moves. It ended up just going for Snatch to steal whatever boost I may have set up, but it's always better to be safe than sorry, and the Revenge of course takes it out, meaning that we got through Zinzolin this time.
I am the mighty Virizion, and I challenge you to a...
Yeah, maybe
There we
another
go,
time.
you little
Now that we have to fight Drayden, we must fight fire with fire, or rather dragons with dragons, and while we're at a type disadvantage, so is he, especially since the level cap now allows us to evolve Steven into Salamence. But going into the fight with Drayden, I still needed to have a solid strategy prepared, otherwise I'd likely get steamrolled by him instead. And my strategy was simple, with only 2 moving parts, the first of which being to abuse Steven's hidden ability, Moxie. Once I inevitably one-shot the Druddigon with an Outrage, that's going to trigger the Moxie ability to boost my attack stat. Then since Salamence is 25% faster than Altaria at base, it's obviously going to tear through it like butter with a +1 Outrage, activating another Moxie boost. Since Flygon and Salamence share the same base speed, I make sure to have some speed EVs to guarantee I outspeed it, and just take it out with a +2 Outrage, proccing yet another Moxie boost and confusing me from Outrage. This reveals the second part of the plan. With a Person Berry, we can get rid of that confusion, meaning that with a +3 Outrage, we're definitely guaranteed to just handle this Haxorus, granting us the 7th gym badge pretty easily. This leads us to our second encounter with Zinzalin, and this guy's got some real speedy ice types, so I make sure to go to the Pokemon World Tournament to pick up a Choice Scarf and give it to Salamence. This means that Salamence, even without EVs at its base speed of 100, will outspeed and be able to take out the 2 Cryogonals with a Brick Break. Then there's Weavile, and even though we outspeed this thing with Choice Scarf, it's got a priority move in Ice Shard, but since it's low in base power, even though it's quad effective in stab, it leaves us at 86 HP, and I can retaliate with a quad effective move of my own, taking it out in one shot. Having dealt with this guy, I'm really glad the final gym leader in this game isn't Wolfric. Now, it turns out the Molten form of Ice is a lot more favorable a matchup for our Dragons. Just as we can pick up a Choice Scarf at the Pokemon World Tournament, we can also pick up a Choice Band, meaning that a Thunder Punch from Cynthia is gonna be enough to one-shot the Wailord. His second Pokemon's then Mantine, but being quad weak to Electric and more of a special tank than defensive, I think you can see where this is going. Paracosta is a lot more of an issue just by virtue of having the Sturdy ability, meaning we can't take it out in one hit with a Thunder Punch no matter what. I actually end up doing about 60% activating its Citrus Berry, and I then get hit by a Scald, just hoping and praying that I don't get burned, and I don't, meaning that it falls to another Thunder Punch. This leaves only as Jellicent, but much like Mantine, it's much more of a specially defensive tank than physically defensive, so we just take it out in a single Thunder Punch, granting us the final gym badge. And having 8 badges gives us access to the final relevant Dreamworld area, the Sparkling Sea, where we can find the OG Dragon type, Dratini. And look, my friends have some awesome favorite Dragon types. Sylph Spectre loves his Kingdra, and Flygon HG, do you really need to ask? It's probably Garchomp. As for me, it's gotta be Dragonite, because he's both powerful and relatable. He vanquishes his foes with the fury of 1,000 suns, and he hates his desk job. And so, once I evolved Dratini into Dragonair and then into our boy, it's time for some Team Plasma shenanigans. Our first opponent is Colress, and Steel is one of the few types that actually resists Dragon. But considering the fact that his first Pokemon is a Steel Electric type, I take the chance to send in Cynthia and go for a Bulldoze, taking the Magneton down to its Sturdy. I then get hit by a powerful Flash Cannon that almost takes me down to half health. Colress then predictably goes for a full restore, which means I can once again just take the Magneton down to Sturdy with Bulldoze and finish it off the next turn. Colress, however, being a massive Magnet enthusiast, of course has a Magnezone as well. I end up going for a really risky play here, going for Bulldoze, taking Magnezone down to Sturdy, as it too hits me with a Flash Cannon, which almost takes out Flygon. Even though I did the calcs, I should have played around the crit here and sent in Salamence to get a free Moxie boost to deal with the Klinklang a bit better. I don't know what it was, but something about using Flygon just gave me this defiant urge to not play around the crit. Either way, I send in Lance versus Klinklang, who tanks the Gear Grind very well because of multiscale and gets a bit of health back from leftovers before superpowering the Klinklang into oblivion. Ulra's next Pokemon is Metang, and since my stats are lowered from superpower, I decide to swap out into Alder, realizing only when I swap in that I switched out Fire Punch for Thunder Punch, basically just giving Metang a free agility before swapping back into Lance. I tank a Meteor Mash on the switch in that fortunately does not get an attack boost, as a Fire Punch then does about 80%, and the Metang goes for yet another agility. This means Colress can outspeed me the next turn with a Rock Slide, unfortunately for him not getting the flinch, which means I can take out the Metang with another Fire Punch. Beheeyem is his final Pokemon, so I immediately swap out into Steven, who has Crunch, who tanks a Psychic a little bit above half. The Crunch then unfortunately leaves Beheeyem deep in the red as it hits me with another Psychic, leaving me at 74 HP. But at this stage, since I'm faster, the next turn it is gonna be game over for Colress, meaning we only have one big Plasma fight left. Yo, Ghetsis' gaming setup is absolutely nutty. Unfortunately, he kinda is too, since we have to fight White Kyurem before his boss fight with no prep in between. And there are several ways I could have tackled this, but the most important threats to deal with are the White Kyurem itself and the Hydreigon on Ghetsis' team. And the most reliable way to get rid of this Kyurem was to give the Choice Band to Salamence and just slap it with an Outrage, and even though I end up getting a critical hit here, it's certainly not necessary. And even though this means we got rid of the Kyurem, we are forced to lead with Banded Ments versus Ghetsis. You might be thinking this is an amazing lead since we can just collect Moxie boosts and sweep through his team. However, even though we can take out his Cofagrigus in one hit with an Outrage, Mummy is unfortunately going to replace our Moxie ability, so no boost for us. And since all of our Pokemon are dragons, he's guaranteed to send in Hydreigon Hydreigon next since he has super effective moves, which means we can freely deal with it, and since I don't get confused, the Seismitoad after it as well. This being the third turn of Outrage, I'm guaranteed to get confused, however, so as Ghetsis sends in his Electros, I have to swap out and I go into Lance. I get zapped by a Thunderbolt on the switch, but because of multiscale, it really doesn't do any damage at all, and I recover a bit of health back with leftovers before trying for a superpower that does about 60% damage. I then get hit by another Thunderbolt, but not being under the protection of multiscale, it does a ton of damage, also being a critical hit. Hoping Ghetsis goes for another Thunderbolt, I swap out into Cynthia, but of course he goes for Crunch. So in spite, I hit back with a Crunch of my own, which is enough to take out the remaining health of the Electros, which means Ghetsis sends out his Drapion. I go for a super effective Bulldoze, but it's not quite enough to take it out, leaving it in the red as I get hit by a Night Slash. Ghetsis then of course goes for a full restore, which means I can freely take out the Drapion with another couple Bulldozes. Finally, he's got a Toxicroak, and even though I've got the super effective Bulldoze, I don't want to risk it going for a Sucker Punch, so I swap into Steven, and that is exactly what the Toxicroak does. It doesn't end up going for it on the follow-up, however, so it just gets absolutely destroyed by a banded Outrage, meaning that we beat Ghetsis.
I can't accept this. This isn't possible. I can't be bested by fools who can't even use Pokemon correctly.
Listen, I never claimed to be the best Nuzlocker in the world, but that one I kind of took personally. With Team Plasma behind us, it's time to make our way to Victory Road. And here we can pick up the final encounter of the run, Zweilous. A gentle nature for Wallace here really isn't anything special, but his big issue is that he evolves at level 64 past the level cap. So with some careful preparation, the final team before the Elite Four consists of Steven with Dragon Claw, Crunch, Brick Break, and Dragon Dance. Next up, we've got Cynthia with Bulldoze, Crunch, and Superpower to do damage, and U-Turn for a bit of utility. Alder the mold-breaking Druddigon has got Outrage, Crunch, Superpower, and Thunder Punch. Lance the Dragonite coming in with Superpower, Fly, Thunder Punch, and Dragon Dance to deal as much physical damage as possible, and leftovers to try and heal up back to multi-scale. Finally, we've got Wallace with Dragon Pulse and Dark Pulse. I just put Superpower and Body Slam on there because there weren't any great moves to give it. I also made sure to give it the experience share and get it as close to level 63 as humanly possible, since we break the level cap as soon as we enter the Elite Four.
And so it's time to find out how good dragons actually are versus our first Elite Four member, Grimsley, and his dark types.
And listen, Grimsley deserves nothing but the worst, and I had a perfect plan to execute. However, he does get a normal gem boosted fake out the first turn to flinch me. Since Lipart's incredibly fast, I then get outsped and hit by a Night Slash before I can take it out with a Choice Band boosted Brick Break, which is going to activate my Moxie ability that's then immediately negated by Crocodile coming in and intimidating that boost away. Fortunately, however, Choice Band boosted super effective Brick Break is still enough to just take out the Crocodile and subsequently start collecting Moxie Boost to destroy all of Grimsley's Pokemon in spectacular fashion.
Where there's a winner, there's also a loser.
Yeah, sucks to be you, pal. Second up is Caitlyn and her Psychic types, and if you think for 1 second that I'm going to forgo the opportunity to use Moxie Choice Band Salamence once again to demonstrate its insane power, you would of course be severely and utterly wrong. Locking myself into a single move with Choice Band isn't even a drawback since Crunch is all I need to completely destroy her team. One important thing that did happen during the fight, however, is that Wallace managed to get to level 64 through the experience share, which means it evolves into a Hydreigon. And I honestly cannot think of any more perfect timing since we're about to take on Chantal with her ghost types. And what more perfect way to bust these ghosts than with Hydreigon? Seriously, this thing's so powerful, it's like most of the reason they introduced the fairy type in the first place. Since Chantal's Chandelore's Choice Scarfed, it is gonna hit me first with a Fire Blast that does barely any damage at all, as I can then just take it out and the remaining 2 Pokemon on her team for the win. This leaves us with only one more Elite Four member to fight, and it's the one I definitely had the most trouble with. I know that doesn't really say much since the most trouble I've had so far is a resisted Fire Blast, but this is where the run really started to get serious. I end up leading with Dragonite and going for Fly right away, which means I can dodge the Rock Tomb and then immediately take out the Throw the next turn. With one threat out of the way, Marshall next sends in his Conkeldurr. And since Conkeldurr's slow as dirt, I can go for Fly as Conkeldurr then gets burned by its Flame Orb to activate Guts, but that's not going to help it out too much since it immediately goes down to a Fly just like Throw. And speaking of throwing, as Marshall sends in Sawk, I decide to make a very bad decision and swap out of Lance into Alder. I end up getting hit by a Rock Slide on the switch, which does a little bit less than half as it then outspeeds and hits me with a Brick Break, and I honestly thought I would at least outspeed here so that going for Outrage wouldn't be such an outrageously bad play, but at least Choice Band Outrage gives me some use for the Mold Breaker ability since I don't have to care about Sturdy. Unfortunately though, it does mean I have to care about getting High Jump kicked in the face since I'm still
locked into Outrage, which means I unfortunately lose Alder. The one benefit of Alder's demise is that I can send in Lance for free, outspeed the Mienshao, which means it's gonna hurt itself as it crashes with high jump kick, and I can then just take it out the next turn with Fly. Finally, Marshall has a Lucario, but since this thing shares the same base speed with Lance and we've got some speed EVs, it's game over after a superpower. If I would have just swallowed my pride and not cared about using Mold Breaker there, we would have still had Alder, but at least we got through it in the end. With the Elite Four behind us, there's only one more fight left. I may be Miss Unova, the top model of this region, but I can't say that I'm the Dragon Master, and so the deciding battle is upon me. It's time to take on Champion Iris. A fellow Dragon-type trainer with a team that's impossible to Moxie boost my way through. Thanks to her Focus Sash Haxorus, things aren't quite as easy as they would seem. Regardless, I still decide to start with Steven and go for a Choice Band Brick Break to take out the Hydreigon, which could otherwise be an incredible threat to collect a Moxie boost. The reason I locked myself into Brick Break instead of Dragon Claw is that I'm expecting Lapras to come in second, which means I can at least hit it for super effective damage. That combined with my +1 from Moxie and Choice Band effectively putting me at +2 attack is enough to take out the Lapras in one shot. Brick Break is also an excellent choice to lock myself into since I'm expecting Aggron to come in third due to its super effective Rock-type moves. And since it's got Rockhead instead of Sturdy, it gets absolutely demolished. Fourth out is Iris's Druddigon, and I probably could have taken it out with a +4 Brick Break, but I wasn't quite sure, so I decided to swap out into Lance here as it goes for Outrage. Because of multiscale, I end up surviving it on 69 HP. The next turn, I decide to go for Fly as the Druddigon is locked into Outrage and becomes confused, and as I hit it with a Fly, I'm hoping that it hits itself in confusion, but unfortunately it just barely survives, doesn't hit itself, taking out Lance. It doesn't even do me the courtesy of taking itself out with Life Orb, so I have to send in Wallace to clean up with Dragon Pulse. Unfortunately, this puts Wallace in the Gen 5 Giant Dragon face-off versus Iris's Focus Sashed Haxorus. And even though Wallace is faster and can hit this thing with a Specs Dragon Pulse, it's of course going to hang on 1 HP due to Focus Sash and totally eviscerate Wallace with an Outrage. Now with only 2 Pokemon remaining, I send in Steven, who I know can outspeed this thing and take it out with a Banded Dragon Claw. I mean, it was at 1 HP, so it wasn't exactly a gamble. This does of course net me an attack boost from Moxie as Iris sends in her final Pokemon Archeops, and with the effective +2 because of that Choice Band, it's gonna be enough to take it out, which means that I beat a Pokemon White 2 Hardcore Nuzlocke using only Dragon types. It even kinda got down to the wire, and Dragons are always a joy to use. Some of my favorite Pokemon in this case with their busted hidden abilities. Listen, let me know what game you want me to tackle next, and if you're this far into the video without being subscribed, I'm sending Dragonite after you.